Welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Gray. The best thing about being a nurse and entrepreneur over the last 25 years are the relationships I've developed and the people I've met. As a legal nurse consultant, I wanted you to hear from those amazing people in the legal and healthcare communities. I wanted you to hear who they are and to celebrate them with me. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. Let's dive into the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm really excited to have my guest Matthew here for one really great reason is because I like to ask past guests on my show who I should have on the show. And so Matthew was recommended to have on the show. The person that recommended Matthew said nothing but amazing things. So I instantly reached out, well, a few days late, but I reached out and I really wanted to have you on here and hear your story and see why you were recommended so well. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I really appreciate you being here. So thanks for spending the time with us.
Absolutely. And I'll pay her later for the recommendation.
Yeah, right.
For all the great things she said. I'll pay her for those.
There we go. Okay, Matthew. So where in the world are you coming from? Where are you sitting right now?
Currently, I am in southern Kentucky. So at the tiny little town, you probably wouldn't know if I told you the name of it. I'm about an hour and a half north of Nashville. That's where most people know.
Okay. That's good for me because I probably wouldn't know either.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's okay, though, that we have a general idea of where you're coming from. So have you always been in Kentucky?
No. So I have traveled really around the country as a nurse. So I did travel nursing for a little while. I've lived here in Kentucky. I've lived in Nashville. I've lived in Oregon. I've lived in Florida. I've lived in Virginia. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think if I've left anywhere out. At some point, it just all becomes a blur, right?
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
Travel. I grew up here in southern Kentucky.
Okay, so you grew up there, and you went to school there? Did you go to nursing school there?
I did at WKU in Bowling Green.
Okay. Did you always want to be a nurse? How did that come about?
That's a great question. So I knew I always wanted to be in healthcare. I started working in healthcare at 15. I have never had a public job outside of the healthcare sector, so that's pretty interesting. But I said I was going to go be a physician. And then I started working at a hospital and realized that my desire to help people, the things that I wanted to do, the goals that I had with my profession really didn't align with being a physician or a provider. And so I really found myself, gravitating toward the bedside, toward being a nurse. So decided I was in college, so probably 19. Okay, this is what I'll do. I'll go be a nurse. This suits my desires more. But originally was a provider.
Yeah. Okay. So when you were 15 and you were working, what did you have? What was your job?
I was in long-term care. So I had volunteered at a long-term care facility here locally for several years beforehand. They had at that time called an activities assistant. Now it has multiple names, right? Life enrichment coordinator, recreational therapy assistant, what have you, position that came available. And so I did that for a year and then became a CNA. And finished my last 2 years there as a CNA. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense then. All right. I know that used to be, how a lot of people had gotten into nursing was to be, a CNA, get the experience in the hospital or long-term care or whatever, just to get the feel for what this is all about and to see if they had wanted to pursue that. So I don't run into very many, though, that lately that have taken that route. So I love to hear that. But I know that in the old days that seemed to be the way to kind of start out. Okay, so you decided you wanted to be a nurse when you're in college. And going to nursing school, did you already have an idea of what kind of specialty you wanted to go into? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I did. So, one of my first years in college, I think it was my second semester, I actually got my certification as an EMTB, which I hold today, so as a basic
Mm-hmm.
EMT.
Okay.
And then I worked as an ER technician while I went through nursing school. So,
Ah,
I loved critical care and emergency medicine. I found that
yep.
those two really drove my adrenaline rush. I say now that I've retired that complex,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that really got me going, right? That made me feel fulfilled and like
Okay.
I was making a difference. And so I knew that I wanted to do ER or ICU, and I've
Yeah.
done both clinically. That's my background is ER and ICU.
Right, right, right. Okay. Did you get a job right out of school in critical care or in the emergency room?
I did. So I
Okay.
have been very lucky that I've been given opportunities I feel a lot of people may not have been given.
Mhm.
I graduated in 2014. I got my license in 2015 and immediately went to trauma ICU. And
Okay.
at the hospital I was working at, that also entailed trauma resuscitation in the emergency department. So
Hmm.
we would respond, a member of our team would respond down to the emergency department to do those resuscitations. So, a lot of people only got to have the one department that they were in, where I felt that I
Right.
initially immediately had both departments. That was
Yeah, you
super
kind of
fun.
got the chance to cross over.
I did. And then I got the chance to see the patient through that entire process, right?
Right,
That was
right.
super cool. And seeing what that initial resuscitation looked like, the things that we needed to do to stabilize someone, but then also following them through sometimes to the OR and then even out into the ICU and
Yeah,
getting to see that long term management
yeah,
gave me a really good perspective, a
right.
holistic picture.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, so you were able to get a job right away in the specialty that you were, meant to be in, I suppose. And you mentioned that you traveled as a nurse. So, how far into your career did you decide, okay, now I want to expand my horizons, right, and travel? I'm assuming that that's what you came to that conclusion, unless it was some other story. I don't want to assume, but how did you come to the thought about traveling, and how far into your career did you decide to travel?
Yeah, so it was quick. I don't recommend it. I
Yeah.
recommend travel nursing, not going into travel nursing so quickly.
Right. Yeah.
I was a year out,
Wow.
about a year and a few months, maybe a year and 3 months, year and 5 months when I took
Okay.
my first travel assignment. But I was single, had no kids, had no family, was
Oh,
born and raised in a small town in southern Kentucky, and the
sure.
world was at my fingertips. And so, honestly, it was more of the getting to see the country that prompted me
Mm-hmm.
to go. I know a lot of people will do local contracts first just to get a
Mm-hmm.
couple contracts under their belt. I have
Mm-hmm.
never been someone who does something small. And so my first contract, I went to Oregon. And
Go
that was,
far.
yeah, I was like, let's see how far we can go away from
Mm-hmm,
Kentucky
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
family and friends. But
Right.
it was an amazing experience. I went out there. I started as an ICU nurse. They
Okay.
found out that I could also do ER, and they said, "Hey, why don't you do both? Can we float?" And
Mm.
then they said, "Well, can you float and do like other departments too?" So I ended up working every level of care except for med surge. There, I did step down
Mm-hmm.
ICU, ER, and filled in as charge nurse on all those departments as well. But that was a lot, and it was overwhelming. Just a
Yeah.
year and a half out of school, or a
Jeez.
little less.
Yeah, no
So.
kidding. I guess you impressed them enough to be able to do that, but I can only imagine you're pretty fresh. I know in the OR we always say, you really become uh, comfortable at the 3 year mark. So I would imagine that not only being kind of fresh out of the gate, however, you did have some background in the
I did,
healthcare,
yeah.
um, and traveling in someplace far, far away. It was it had to have been challenging. Now, was it in a big hospital, small hospital, community hospital? What kind of place were you in?
Yeah, it was a small community-owned hospital. Honestly, I loved it. Loved
Mhm.
it. It probably around, I think they had 50 something beds, maybe a little more
Yeah,
than that.
yeah.
But they were not a trauma center. They were not a neuro center. It was in the mountains in Southern Oregon. So I learned some of those challenges of rural healthcare, which I also fell in love with and have continued to practice in. But like the nearest trauma center would have probably been 2.5 hours away. The nearest neuro center was about an hour and 30 minutes. So lots of treat, stabilize, and ship. We did that a lot. We flew patients quite often. And a lot of fixed wing, which here in Kentucky, that's not a thing. We do mostly rotor wing. But there, you're in the mountains, and you can't land a helicopter in the mountain. And so there was a lot of, they would bring it to us, we would stabilize it, a fixed wing would come to the airport, an ambulance would bring the team to us. So that was really cool, too, to get to see that side of things as well.
Wow, you jumped right in. You're right.
I did.
You jumped in with
Head
both
first.
feet. We're going to just do this.
I did.
Okay,
I did.
So how long were you there?
So I was there twice. I was there the first time for 4 months. I came home, and in the winter, the snow blocks the mountain, the pass, and I do not want to get stuck there in the winter. And so I came home for winter, worked at a tertiary academic medical center here close by for 6 months, PRN, full-time hours, and then went back out and did an 8-month stint. And so was there 8 months, loved it. But then came back home. My stepfather got sick, and so my mother needed me back home to help with that. Came home, started working here in an emergency department, and then went into administration. So it's been a full circle picture.
No kidding. In a very short period of time, I imagine.
Yes.
I mean, again, that's not your typical route for most people. Okay, and especially the administration route. I can relate to this because I was a young nurse when I jumped into the management and administrative roles. And it was kind of similar to where I started a podcast. So it's like, jump in with both feet. Why don't we? When I was a young nurse as well. And so in the OR, that was the only way to go. And I just asked questions, and people said, well, you sound smart enough. Why don't you first take the charge position? And then why don't you sit in our budget meetings and all of those things? So I can relate to that, being a young management, role, and the challenges around that as well, being young and in those roles. And, gaining the respect. So I imagine that you had some of those same challenges getting into that. Of course. Yeah. Okay. So how did you get into that side of things?
Sure. So I quickly into my career became a charge nurse, and now, at that time that was pretty unheard of. Today in healthcare, if you've been a nurse 6 months, you're a charge nurse. But in that time, that was a novel idea. Right. And so I started charging pretty early. I went back to grad school, and so at the time, when about 10 years ago, you had to go or have 2 years of clinical experience before you could go into a nurse practitioner route or a nursing graduate school route. So I decided to do an MBA in that 2-year period. So once I graduated with that MBA, I went quickly into that after I finished my BSN. Like you said, I asked questions, right? I was asking questions a lot. What can I do? How can I learn? How can I get involved? And honestly, I had a really good CNO at the hospital I was working at. And I guess one night I got brave and I sent her an email and said, hey, I just finished my MBA. I recognize that I'm 23 years old and that this is unheard of, but I would love some leadership experience. And so she replied back essentially and just said, I know you, I know your work, I know your professionalism. How about doing some PRN as a house administrator? And I said, sure, that's fantastic. So I did primary ER with some PRN house administration work for about 6 months, and then I became a full-time house administrator. So as you mentioned, all kinds of challenges, being 23 years old, running operations for an entire hospital system at night. So I was the only administrator in the hospital. Not that there wasn't people on call or resources available, but presented a lot of unique challenges that I was able to work through and learn from. And then relationships and how to navigate relationships and managing people. And I could tell story after story of the things that happened.
I bet. Did you find that your MBA came in handy for that? Because there aren't very many nurses out there with their MBA or the business, knowledge or savviness of business, and that it's a shame, honestly. I think that even when we're working in a facility, we still have to use our sales skills, right? We still have to understand those things. So I'm curious on the administrative side, how you were able to use some of that MBA knowledge. Did you find it useful?
Super helpful. Super helpful. So it taught me a lot about budget, which as nurses, we don't get unless it's on the job training. So, reading financial statements, whether that be cash flows or balance sheets or taxes, I worked for not-for-profit. So reading their 990 and all of those things, I think that if I hadn't done my MBA, it would have been incredibly challenging. It was still challenging, not to say that it wasn't, because it was, but I at least had some knowledge of it. And then I can say too, I also now, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I also have an MSN and a DNP in Executive Nursing Administration, and comparing the two, they're very different focuses. Where your MBA is very numbers driven, data driven, business acumen, with a small emphasis on managing what we call human capital in the business world, or managing people. I got the opposite of that in my MSN and my DNP, where I truly learned how to manage nurses, and there was more of a human component to it. It was a great balance. I looking back, I'm glad that I did both. I think if I had only done one or the other, I would have had some pretty difficult challenges in navigating that administration front.
Interesting. I find that fascinating, actually. I don't think we talk much about that side of things, at least on here. So you decided when you were in the house administration role, did you decide to get your MSN then, or your DNP then? Tell me a little bit about, because I want to dig a little bit into that.
Sure.
I know this is Legal Nurse Podcast, but since we haven't really talked about this, I think it's fascinating, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So share with us a little bit about that journey for you.
Yeah. So for one, I've not been out of school since I was 2. I've never left school. I started I tell people I started at a public daycare that was offered by our local school system. So I started public school at 2, right away. And I've never stopped. But no, I was going to go do my NP. So that's why I took that 2-year, a gap year, even though it wasn't a gap. I was doing business instead of nursing. I got my MBA, and then I said, I'm going to go be a nurse practitioner. Okay. So I started a dual F&P ACNP program, but I had fallen in love with leadership. I felt that I could have a broad impact on not just patients, but also staff. I would like to think that my staff that worked with me would say that I was someone who advocated for them, and I loved that. I loved getting to serve them, and then in turn watching them serve our patients. Sure. And so I made the switch and said, you know what? I'm already in the program. So I reached out to the advisors in the program and said, listen, I really don't think that nurse practitioners for me. I love the business side of things. I love living at that, what I call the critical intersection of business and clinical care. That's a very fine balance that a lot of people, unless you've ever lived there, you'll never know what that feels like.
Sure, yeah.
When you're balancing business decisions sometimes against human life, it's a very difficult place to be, but I found that I thrived there. And so I switched and said, let's do this MSN track. I went to the University of South Alabama for that, and they had a program where I did a BSN to DNP. And so I was there 4 years total. In the first 2 years, I got my MSN, and then I continued on for another 1.5 years to get my DNP. It was amazing, the things that you learn in those programs. I always tell people, and we all can disagree, right? You don't have to agree with me, but I tell people you can be a natural born leader and still fail because you lack the hard skills necessary to lead people. Sure. You can be not a naturally born leader and have hard skills that you get through formal education and still be somewhat successful. Now, I'm not going to say that's not going to come without issues, but be somewhat successful. But I think when you take a natural born leader and you combine that hard skill from that academic setting, it truly becomes this beautiful marriage that is very fruitful. And that's what I've seen in my career. I've been able to take that natural leader side, that human empathy side, a lot of times the things that nursing offered me, right? That more nurturing, loving, caring side, and balance the more rigid, numbers-driven, data-driven business side of things. So it's been an amazing, wonderful, beautiful career, which has led me to where I am now. So now I'm in law school. Who goes to law school? Like who goes
never-ending
nursing school?
You are here.
So I know it's like
one would call you an overachiever, but that's okay. There's
a recovering academic. Is what I am.
I used to when I was young. I used to take pride in how much I would love to study and learn. I mean, obviously, I have plenty of books back here, so I can totally appreciate that. But there was a time where I said, okay, and I'm done.
And we're there. I'm there. Everyone keeps saying, what comes after law school?
I don't, okay, so now let's get this timeline. You decide legal is where you're at. Where in this journey did you decide that, and how did you decide that first? And then how did you decide to go to law school?
Sure. Very haphazardly. So I told you I hadn't been out of school since I was 2.
Yeah.
I was graduating with my DNP in May of 2023, and I was looking ahead at that date. So this was March, looking ahead to May. And honestly, I was scared. I don't know life outside of school. I've never had a time in my life where I've not been working full time and in school, and then for the last 8 years in graduate school. So I had no clue what that looked like. And so I honestly sat down and I thought, what would complement this business and clinical care, duo that I have going here?
Yeah.
And so this will sound like a sales pitch, but only because I've said it about 50,000 times when I say that I love living at the intersection of business and clinical care, but that's often paralleled with legal and regulatory compliance.
Sure.
And so I was looking ahead. What is my end goal? Potentially executive leadership, not really sure, but what would essentially round out this, this career trajectory? So I decided in March that I was going to apply to law school. I researched. There was only one LSAT date left to take the LSAT. I took it in April. I applied in April. I got in May, and I started in August. So
much for
it was
a bit of a gap.
Insane. But it was fun because it was interesting. I was walking in to get my cap and gown for my DNP, and my phone buzzed, and I looked down, and it said that my LSAT score had been released. Hardest test I've ever taken in my life.
Oh, right? Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Terribly difficult. And I looked at it, and it said it was a 150, which is not super competitive, but I don't remember the statistic, but like 60% of people who get a 150 or higher get into law school.
Yeah.
And so it was a 152. And so I walk back to the car, and I open the door, and my mom's like, "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." And I said, "I think I just got into law school." And she's like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, why do you think that?" So I told her. I graduated, beautiful weekend, and then my mother took me on a cruise. My mother and my aunt took me on a cruise to celebrate. Yeah. We're sitting there having dinner one night. Again, my phone buzzes. I have the internet package on the cruise. I pull it up, and it says, "Congratulations, you've been accepted to Northern Kentucky University Chase College of Law." So surreal. Had zero really expectations of getting in.
Sure.
It was more of a quick last-minute decision, and I'm like, okay, I'll try it. If I don't get in this time, and it's something that I want to continue, we'll do it again in the future. But got in, and so that's honestly what spawned my interest in legal nurse consulting.
Okay.
So had done this before in the administrative role, really had looked at a lot of, I'm sure as you know this from administration, I'm sure you've sat through a lot of, depending on where you're at, intense analysis, root cause analysis, wherever you're at, they call them different things. Sentinel events. And so I really loved those moments. And so I was like, this could be a way that I could get legal experience without doing clinics at school that I'm not paid for. So it was really that strategic business decision of like, I need this legal experience. I have a nursing background and a legal background, so I can semi-speak both languages. And this will give me what I need to see if I love it. And honestly, I've fallen in love. Now my professors tell me regularly when they say, didn't you say you wanted to do executive leadership when you got here? And I'm like, well, I did, but I don't know now. And they're like, you're going to be a litigator. You're not doing that. You're going to be in a courtroom. And I'm like, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. But I love it.
That's so cool. I love that. So what is your target date to finish law school?
Yeah, so it's a part-time night program. I actually transferred. If there are any nurses listening to this podcast who want to go to law school, this is a great program. I'm now at the University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio. It's actually online. It's one of a very few schools that are ABA accredited and also essentially fully remote. I only have to go to campus 1 weekend a year. So it is part-time. It is a night program. So instead of 3 years, it's 4. So I'll graduate in 2027.
That's great, though. I really love that you shared that. Sometimes my student itch comes out, and then I realize how old I am, and I say,
absolutely not. You can still do it.
Keep going. But it is always intriguing. Okay, so you've got a target date out there. You're working as a legal nurse consulting. Are you doing any bedside or administrative work at this time as well?
Yeah, as if I had nothing else to do. I have 4 jobs.
Okay.
I work PRN clinically in an emergency department. I can't give up the bedside.
Good,
every time I try, I go back. I just love it. It's what kind of fuels me. I also teach. I'm an adjunct professor at Northern Kentucky University in their DNP program.
Okay.
And then I have the LNC business, and I work full-time remotely from home, but doing utilization management for a large academic center for the emergency department. So I review cases that are going to be admitted and essentially advise or consult with the physician about what status to enter them as and those kinds of things.
So you really have your hand in all things.
I do. And listen, every day I'm like looking for something, and then I'm thinking I'll be Googling like jobs here, and then I'll think to myself, and when are you going to fit that in?
I know. I have that same problem.
I mean, where am I going to put it? I don't have enough time.
Yeah. I have that same problem. Some people think I'm crazy too, where it's like, but there's still 5 minutes here. I can fit it in right here.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, do you find time for balance? Do you enjoy, are there hobbies you like to do? Go outside, take a deep breath.
Yeah, I definitely do. And working remotely is amazing. It's allowed me some of that flexibility to take a break and go do the things that I love. I love relationships, so friends, family. That's huge to me. After we get finished with this, I already messaged my mother and was like, let's go have dinner tonight. So I love doing those things, and sometimes that can be my escape, is to get away for at least an hour, 2 hours, have some meal, have a drink with friends, family, and then kind of reset and come back. Yeah. I also love to travel, so I do that frequently as well, as frequently as I can. Yeah. And so I recently did a trip to Europe back in October. which was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We went and did a Christmas market tour in Austria. And then crazy, I got to be on a Hallmark movie. They were filming a Hallmark movie while I was there. And so we got to be extras on a Hallmark movie, which was, I mean, that was essentially, that's the dream, right? To be at the Christmas markets in Europe and be on a Hallmark movie.
And they're filming.
And they're filming a Hallmark movie.
That's pretty fantastic. I love that.
Yeah. So it was pretty great.
Yeah. So you do find time for balance, which is great.
I do.
That's fantastic. So I know that you have a website and you blog, and I wanted to share a little bit about that as well, because kind of right around the time I asked you to do this podcast, you created this great blog post about getting started in the legal nurse community world. And I can appreciate that so well, because I created this document, and it wasn't something that I wrote. It literally was, I took all of the Facebook groups and I just took all of the recommendations in those Facebook groups and I put it in one sheet, and that was it. It was just a simple thing to do. So it's become very valuable, I suppose. People share it, we talk about it, it's there. And so when you shared this blog post, it's so well written that I instantly was like, this needs to go on that sheet as well. So how long have you had this website? What is this? Is this how you typically market for your business, and how do you market for your business? But talk about the blog, your website a little bit, because I love it. Not many LNCs out there have one, and what you share is really great.
Sure. So I'm huge with branding. Again, I have the MBA. So I can't turn off that business side. And so, when I started my LNC business, and this is something that you'll see come out in future blog posts and articles, I started with the brand. So I had an idea. I started with making, a small business plan, nothing formal. This is what I want. This is what I want it to look like. I sent it to a friend who's a graphic designer and said, I need a logo. And then I kind of built off of that. The website, it's so funny. People reach out to me all the time and they'll say, oh, your website looks fantastic. Like, it's so well organized, which makes me smile because I did it myself using a platform that's drag and drop. So don't think that it's terribly difficult to start a website. And then I truly, when I got started, so to talk about the article a little bit, when I got started and I was, looking, doing market research, Googling what do legal nurse consultants do, how do you get started? And I'm going to say this, I'm pretty upfront. There's a lot of glamorized things out there that made this profession look as if you can start today, make $1 million tomorrow, drive a G-Wagon, live on the beach, and that is not the case.
Right. No.
It is not the case at all. I promise I don't drive. I drive a Kia. Okay. So it's nothing glamorous. And so really I saw that, and I had to make my way through all of that to build my business initially. And then I was looking at, at things that people were posting in these groups, and a lot of times, and I think a lot of it's nursing, we're taught to censure what we're saying and to not be so abrupt or abrasive, and to kind of mitigate what we say. And I would see something and I'm like, that's only half true. We're not acknowledging how difficult this is. Like this, it's difficult to build a business. And so truly, I was talking to some friends of mine, one of which recommended me, and I said, listen, I want to give just raw, unfiltered education and feedback, and to tell people this is an amazing career path. It will give you the things that you want if you're willing to work for them.
Right.
But they are not handed to you. And so that gave rise to the unfiltered truth. Every nurse is not meant to be a legal nurse consultant, which was the name of the blog post. And there were some things in there, things that I didn't recognize. The number of technologies that you're going to need to learn to be an LNC, the writing, which luckily law school helped me a little bit with that. Legal writing and writing academic nursing writing are very different.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning how, attorneys write, learning how to just navigate the legal world.
Yeah.
You're reaching out to attorneys, but often you're talking to their legal assistant or their paralegal or a host of different legal staff members that aren't the attorney. And you're all, now you have deadlines and you have this legal jargon that you need to understand and elements of cases that you need to meet and what's an affidavit and what's an interrogatory and how do you give a deposition. It's a whole nother world. And I don't think we were, as a profession, acknowledging it, right? We were saying, it's beautiful, come be part of us.
Right.
And then people would get here and they would reach out to me and be like, I'm so discouraged. I can't get an attorney client yet, or I can't. And so truly that's what gave rise to my articles. Now, have they worked well for marketing as well? Yes. Several attorneys have seen them and reached out and said, I loved what you wrote here. Some of them are more clinical based. I have articles on charting by exception and hindsight bias and legal nurse consultant reviews and those kinds of things. But then also some things that are helpful to new LNCs. The article I just posted, which has that self-appraisal. I think that's so helpful. It asks just very simple questions. You score yourself, and then it tells you if you answered no to 2 or more of these questions, you may need to focus on this area before you launch your business, which I wish I would have had. When I did it.
So valuable.
And then tomorrow, spoiler alert, which we're filming, and so I'm not sure when this will go out, but
it'll be
tomorrow,
out, but it'll be out,
I'm releasing an article called How to Get Your First Attorney Client, which essentially goes through a lot of the struggles of doing that, and that sometimes your first attorney client doesn't even come from the attorney. It comes from a fellow LNC or networking with paralegals or some things that you don't even consider, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what gave rise to that. It's all on my blog, on my website, which is there for anyone to go see. I also post them on LinkedIn. And then I will say, without saying too much, that there is definitely more coming.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a gift.
I kept getting people reaching out saying, we want more. Please give us more of this. We want this raw feedback. We want to know what we're getting into. And so that has, as if I have nothing else, other things to do, right? No school or jobs. We're definitely going to go a little deeper into that and kind of open up that arena. I love helping LNCs. I love helping any nurse. Really, I love teaching. And so.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's a gift that you've given people. I know that a lot of that information hides behind a paywall, and it's a mystery, as you alluded to, the real facts of it. And so by you sharing the hard facts, the unfiltered facts, is really a gift. And that's, I can appreciate that in the fact that, it's free for someone to read, just like this podcast. I don't make a penny off this podcast. It is just something that I love to do. I love to get to know other people. I love relationships. I want to lift people up because that's just who I am. I just naturally love to do that. The benefit, obviously, another reason why I do it is, I don't know, you remember my name. It's something for me to share. It's marketing. I'm just the single person that has the podcast, but I really love to lift other people up, and that is my intention. So directly, I don't make any money off it, but yes, of course, marketing, my name, people remember me. I'm an OR nurse, those kind of things. So I can appreciate you sharing very valuable information. Because guess what? You're going to be top of mind. You're already top of mind very quickly. You wrote one blog post and you are top of mind by many legal nurses. What a great way to market yourself. So I can appreciate that. I wanted to just make sure that you know that that's just it's very valuable. And I think the more that we can do that for other people just makes this community, a lot more transparent and inviting and encouraging, and it's not that typical nurses eat your young environment. That's another reason I have this podcast, is because it really isn't that. We're all out to, the more successful we all are, the more successful our community is, and the more likelihood of an attorney hiring a legal nurse, it just happens more often because we've got a great reputation, because we all stick together and lift each other up. There's no better way, right? So
yeah, no, I agree.
You're definitely part of that. So what I know you've obviously shared a ton of advice in your writing. What kind of advice, because there are a lot of new legal nurses or people that are looking forward to being a part of this, what advice, besides go read his blog, go read Matthew's blog post, what advice would you tell them? It's like, okay, I am ready to find out more about this. What would you tell someone?
Sure. For one, I would say to plug into some of these Facebook groups and some of these resources that aren't hidden behind a paywall. These courses are phenomenal, right? I mean, that's, sure. I will tell you, even though I said I wouldn't, I'll tell you that I'm looking at creating a course that's affordable, but it's based off of, I want to give you the information so that you know what you're getting into, so that you can make an informed decision. And I don't think that's always the case.
Yeah.
So plug into some of these resources where there is this unfiltered feedback. Yeah. Find people like myself, like you, other nurses, legal nurse consultants that you have spotlighted here on the podcast, who can be a mentor to ask questions to. And then I posted this today on a post that I tagged you in. Just keep swimming. Yeah. There are going to be lots of obstacles when you jump into the legal nurse consulting world that people don't tell you about, and sometimes that they don't even know about until they encounter them themselves. Sure. And so just keep swimming. And a lot of the things that you're going to see in my article tomorrow is that every rejection is a data point to learn from, right? Don't take that personally. You're going to get told no. I had someone who, had told me to go read a book, and I'm in law school. Okay. You're going to have things that happen where you truly recognize, you can take it two ways. You can take it personally, and you can let it defeat you and essentially defeat your business. Or you can say, you know what, that may have come from even though it may have come from a place of malice, I don't think it did, but even if it did, there may be truth in it. And what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this attorney telling me no, that my sales pitch was too long? Oh, well, maybe I need to work on my elevator speech a little bit. That needs to be shorter. Or why did this attorney tell me that he really liked me, but I talked too much about my nursing background and not enough about what I could do legally for him? Oh, well, maybe I need to focus on that. Every no is a data point along your trajectory. And you take those data points and you look at them and you study them and you grow your business. And so just keep swimming. That's the number one.
I love it so much.
Keep swimming.
So true. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. There are so many different obstacles and obstacles that you could not predict. And that could derail you or discourage you or say, this is maybe not for me. But if you do love this work or this environment, the only way to do it is to keep swimming. So I love the fact that you share that. That's really great advice.
Absolutely.
Okay, Matthew, how can we find you? This is all going to be in the show notes as well, but how can we find you?
Sure. So I think, look, this is terrible. I say I'm all about branding, and I don't even remember my LinkedIn handle. I think it is Matthew Paul Garvey on LinkedIn, that you can find me there. You can also find me on my website, which is www.garvey, my last name, so GARV as in Victor, EYCES.com. And you can contact me through my website. You can read all my blog posts from my website. You can see the services that I offer. And then, for any of you new LNCs who are listening to this, please don't think that my contact form on my website is just for attorneys. Anyone can contact me. If you just need some advice or you have a question, please feel free to contact me. I'm always happy to help. And then that form comes directly to my email. So I answer back usually really quick, unless it's like finals week.
Yeah, right. No,
but usually I answer quickly.
Yeah. And I will tell you that you will get emails. I guarantee you. Is that is the nice thing about this podcast is I could say every guest on here gets at least one message from a listener appreciating that they connected in some way. So I'm sure that you will get an influx of listeners heading your way just to ask for advice or really just to give you kudos. So I look forward to that. And it was really great getting to know you. And I really appreciate you spending your time sharing your story. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I look forward to talking with you again, and then also to anyone who reaches out.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us in this fun conversation on the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I hope you found this episode as inspiring and empowering as I always do. And I hope that you share this episode with your friends. If you enjoyed it, I would love it if you could leave us a review or comment, as I would love to share them in the future episodes. Or hop on over into my DMs and send me a quick message. I can be found on Instagram at anna.b.gray, on my website at limitlesslnc.com, and over on LinkedIn at Anna Gray. And I want you to remember, you are limitless. Until next time.